Hey guys, welcome back to the channel McNallie Money, the official home of power mining analysis. A big episode in store for you today. We've got news out from many of your favorite miners, not to mention earnings from Hut 8 and Mara to review. Before we get into it, take a second, smash the like button, guys. Big help to myself and the channel. Anthony absolutely loves it. If you're not already subscribed, McNallie Money, feel free to join and let us know in the comments section below what you thought about these earnings results and your current top pick in the space. With that being said, let's get into today's video. Okay guys, away we go. Tuesday afternoon, no shortage of news in the sector this week. We're off to the races. We've got a full agenda on today's podcast, a plethora of news. We've got some earnings, we've got production updates, some financing, really everything you're looking for in the Bitcoin mining space. But before we get into that, we've got to address the price of Bitcoin itself. This one has been slipping over the last few days. We reported yesterday a few big accounts forecasting Bitcoin to decline under 100,000. It looks like we may be well on our way.
Yeah, I mean, Bitcoin price has been pulling back since the middle of last week there, and at the moment now 102,000. Will it dip below 100,000? It's been over 100,000 for some considerable time, so that's certainly a level we don't want to see it drop below. But as I say, Bitcoin price will do what it does. Obviously, some maybe movement out there in terms of. I read somewhere that some of the long-term holders have been starting to sell some of their Bitcoin, and I saw another article suggesting that Bitcoin actually follows what we call the business cycle, and the business cycle is generally 4 years as well. So not to be confused with the bull and bear market cycle. But when you put the Bitcoin price over the business cycle, there's a lot of correlation to that. So, we are looking at Bitcoin following some of the macroeconomics in terms of what's happening out there in the markets. And so we're seeing a pullback in the markets at the same time as well. Remember, the S&P and Dow Jones and NASDAQ have all recently reached all-time highs. So, is that sustainable? We'd like to hope so, but in reality, probably not. And we'll expect maybe a pullback on that. And if we get a pullback on that, maybe more of a pullback on Bitcoin. But we know the long-term position on Bitcoin. We've seen for the last 14 years it tends to rise over the years to come. I don't look at this from a day-to-day basis. Look at it from a step out and look at it from a long-term perspective.
Yeah, and we've held that $100,000 level for quite some time. Another 4-year cycle they line up with nicely, the election cycle, and there seems to be a lot of quantitative activity, whether tightening or easing. It looks like the M2 global money supply is on the rise right now. Quantitative easing is back in full swing, so hopefully that can restore some of the confidence in the market here. The nice thing for us, the Bitcoin miners have really started to decouple from the price of Bitcoin over the last few quarters. Despite the big pullback here, we've seen a lot of positive developments on the HPC AI side of things. If we bring up the heat map, Anthony, a little bit of red on the shorter duration, but again, if you zoom out, as you just said, in relation to Bitcoin, things start to tell a much better story.
Yeah, the year-to-date change for the majority of these miners tells a whole different picture from what we're looking at on the day and the 5-day and even the month now, which, just over a week ago, the month was predominantly green as well with a significant increase. But we are seeing a bit of a pullback there. And as I say, maybe some profit taking, maybe people looking to put their money into, different investments. We know that gold's had a nice run up there, but some of these stocks just having a pullback today. Hut, who we're going to talk about in a little bit more detail, they're down 9%. DMG down 9%. IREN actually bucking the trend today. They're actually in the green at the moment. One of the very few miners that are in the green. Share price just a fraction under $70. Remember, going back to April the 14th, you've got to pick that share price up for a little over $5. That's a 14x in the space of 6 or 7 months, Bryce.
Now, in terms of housekeeping, we're hot on the heels of earnings week here. We talked about some of the podcasts we have set up. Actually, later today, we've got TeraWulf on, Patrick Fleury. Tomorrow, we've got the CFO, Salman Khan from Mara. ABTC also just announced Q3 earnings coming out on the 14th. Now, we're going to be down in Texas for that date. We're hoping to have the team on the following week. This is exciting to start to see some of the numbers coming out from these companies. ABTC, Hut 8, a very interesting story, obviously with those links to the Trump family directly.
Yeah, and if you think about the merger, which only happened literally a couple of years ago, you had the likes of Hut 8 and US Bitcoin, and both of them had sort of like a market capitalization of around about $500 million each. So then that joining together of $1 billion of a total value of a company. Look at where we are today in terms of the valuation of Hut and the valuation of ABTC. It's a whole different ball game. We had Asher on the podcast many times, and he said, during some of those calls there, give me a mark once I've completed 9 months in the role. I'm going to do some look at some of the costs of the company, give the company some more direction of how they're going to go forward. But then, quote me on the third quarter. That's when you should be sort of like, putting your report in there. And we certainly did. And we had him on the podcast after that third quarter, and we gave him a big tick in the box there on his performance. They really have shown how you can turn around. And all those shareholders in Hut 8 that for 3 years didn't quite see the growth in any of their Bitcoin mining in terms of hash rate, in terms of replacing machines, are now looking at a totally different company with many, many strategies in play.
Yeah, very nice to see the developments there. Again, we're hopeful we can get Eric on the channel, but we'll see what we can come up with. Another housekeeping item yesterday, we reported Cipher earnings, a big announcement, a co-location announcement for their Black Pearl facility. Today, they came out with some financing, a convertible note, this time to support Barbara Lake expansion.
Yeah, and just like we saw from TeraWulf when they announced their deals there, that literally within a day or so of the deal being announced, we got another update on how they were going to start financing. So Cipher have announced an offering of 1.4 billion of senior secured notes. This is going to help develop the Barber Lake site. Now remember, the Barber Lake site is where FluidStack have that contract there. There's 244 megawatts of total power being issued to that contract, of which 168 is actually compute power. The remaining power is in support of that compute power to deliver it, and hence we have that sort of that PUE of a rating of about 1.45. That gives them 56 megawatts available should FluidStack decide to increase the size of the contract there. So there's plenty of opportunities out there. But to build these sites out to a level that the client requires, Cipher were talking about, $9 to $11 million per megawatt. So there's a lot of megawatts to build there. This is going to help them get through that early position there. And I expect to see more announcements in the very near future from Cipher in terms of delivering how they're going to meet the requirements for that big deal with AWS at the Black Pearl site, because that 300 megawatt site, which is currently being utilized for Bitcoin mining, and in fact only just been refurbished for Bitcoin mining in this last sort of 12 to 18 months, is now going to be fully delivering high performance compute for that new contract. That's a 300 megawatt gross contract there, and there's 300 megawatts already energized in that site there. So as soon as they can get those buildings built, they'll start receiving the revenues from that client.
Cipher's got so many sites, we can hardly keep them all straight now. These contracts, co-location, site announcements. The other thing I wanted to mention, Barber Lake, 500 megawatts of additional power under MOU. So this could be quite a full-size facility, again, if FluidStack continues to look to upsize. Now, another housekeeping from yesterday, we talked about a plethora of Analyst upgrades. This one kind of bucking the trend. HC Wainwright coming out with a sell recommendation, $45 price target on IREN. So almost counter to everything else we talked about yesterday. Maybe get your thoughts on this one, Anthony.
Yeah, this is obviously in the other direction, and there were a few analysts yesterday, some social media analysts, to be honest, were looking at the deal from a perspective and putting in some sort of like assumptions to see what returns, and if you put the wrong assumptions in there, you can get a whole raft of data that's not really as accurate. I'd be prepared to hear what the company say in terms of how they're going to deliver that. I mean, it's a significant contract, and obviously they're going to be buying all those GPUs, whether they buy them in terms of cash or whether they do it through a lease program like that. But it's still going to be a significant cost to the company. Hence the size of that revenue for the sake of just 5 years. We're talking $9.5 billion of revenue. That's a similar amount of revenue that Core Scientific are receiving for 12 years, delivering 590 megawatts. But Core Scientific don't have to deliver any GPUs. The client will bring their own GPUs into the facilities there and manage that themselves along with the power. So it's going to be interesting to see, the costs of how we're going to deliver this. And maybe HC Wainwright's perspective, they think it's not as lucrative as people are first looking at there. But there's two sides to everything. Mike Colonnez, who's the analyst at HC Wainwright, he's obviously covering a number of the miners out there, and he'll be having data that from his perspective it doesn't stack up. But it'd be interesting to see how this develops there, because Dan was very keen to show us what they could do themselves without going through a co-location deal, and they've actually done that now with the first 200 megawatts of compute power. This is going to be interesting, but cost is within their control. They can manage a lot of the costs internally, and we'll see how that develops from here.
We sure will. And I heard a discussion last night. If they're running everything in-house, they may be able to offset some of the costs with the actual Bitcoin mining, using some of the power when they're not running at full PUE. So that's a benefit, again, a unique competitive advantage for some of these Bitcoin miners. If we bring up Mike Colonnez on tip ranks, you can see actually top 15 analyst out of all the 10,000 Wall Street analysts. So potentially he has a point. Time will tell. We can ask Kevin Deedy about this, his counterpart, HC Wainwright, next week again on the trip down there. Now, in terms of additional price targets, one out from Hut 8. We're going to cover their earnings a little bit later in the presentation, and an IREN management meeting with Roth Capital. So this one, not super familiar with, a little bit interesting.
Yeah, so Cantor Fitzgerald have raised the Hut 8 price target from $24 all the way up to $64. And they're actually keeping an overweight rating on the shares. So, they've obviously seen the updates from the company there. This 8.65 gigawatts of pipeline, probably one of the largest pipelines that of all the miners at the moment. I mean, the ones that we've seen around about the highest at about 3 gigawatts. This is significantly higher. Now, pipeline doesn't mean it's all being developed now, but it's aspirational. But when you've got a couple of the president's sons on the management team of a subsidiary of the main company, anything's possible. And I wouldn't bet against Hut at the moment in terms of delivering this here. They've had a stellar year, and things look like they're only just going to get better. And this price target emphasizes that from Cantor Fitzgerald's perspective.
It certainly does. Now, this IREN meeting, what do you make of this one, Anthony?
I don't know. I mean, obviously Roth Capital and a number of the other analysts, they have certain dates when they meet with clients. I don't know if this is purely IREN or whether it's a day that Roth Capital are hosting, of a conference, and IREN will be going to that there. So maybe we can speak with Dan when he comes on the podcast, if we can get that podcast before the 11th. If not, we'll try and find out from their investor relations and see if there's anything to be concerned about. But I just think it's normal business. Remember that slide yesterday about the total power? The total power that's in development for IREN is circa 3 gigawatts. That is 3 gigawatts of power, not an aspiration. They have the Sweetwater facilities there giving you over 2 gigawatts of power alone. And they've only issued, the first 10, 11% of the power in the first contract, 200 megawatts with the ancillary power, taking that to about 300 megawatts in total. And when you've got, 3 gigawatts, you've still got 90% of the power that can potentially be utilized towards HPC.
I saw an interview highlight from Dan on TV last night saying, hey, there's a 45 gigawatt shortfall. We've got three we can contribute. When you put it that way, pretty impressive to think how big this company could grow. Now, speaking of large companies and growth, a doubleheader from Mara today coming out with a big press release talking about really, again, stepping into this energy generation or at least a partnership in that avenue, along with earnings. Now, we've got Salman Khan, CFO, on tomorrow. He can slice and dice the numbers, talk to us about earnings. We're looking forward to hosting Fred Thiel, CEO, in a few weeks' time to get more of a strategy update. We can break both of these down at a high level. For me, Anthony, it seems like Mara is really kind of thinking outside of the box and almost getting into this HPC AI game from the back door. They've made a number of strategic partnerships, announcements, press releases as of late, and this one really, once again, a unique twist or approach compared to what we've seen in the space.
Yeah, this is an interesting one there. This relationship between Mara Petroleum and Mara, under this initiative itself, Mara will leverage Mara Petroleum's Delaware Basin natural gas resources and provide the digital energy infrastructure to deliver reliable, scalable power and compute solutions. So Mara will actually build and own multiple power generating facilities and data centers at locations across the Delaware Basin, Bryce. And we're going to start, with a capacity of about 400 megawatts. That's probably scalable, according to Mara, to 1.5 gigawatts. And it will have a useful life of the next 20 to 30 years. So this looks like a long-term collaboration between these two companies. And this is exactly what's making Mara that fully integrated company that we've always expected it to turn to.
Yeah, well said. And Delaware Basin, not to be confused with Delaware State. We've got a map here. We were wondering how long are these natural gas pipelines going to need to be? Looks a little bit more local, but this is a great example. We already know they own a wind farm in Texas. Again, getting in that full vertically integrated power generation strategy we've heard from Ben Gagnon as well. Now, another strategy point in the deck, talking about their digital asset management, actually putting a fair amount of their Bitcoin stack to work now, various different initiatives. We've talked about some of the relationships with 2Prime, collateralized yields. There's a lot more optionality now for these companies that have Bitcoin on balance sheet.
There is. And when you think about Mara's HODL, which is the second largest for many of the public companies out there behind strategy, they have well over 52,000 coins. They're using about a third of it to actively manage or pledge as collateral through this strategy. So at the moment, 5,077 Bitcoin is pledged as collateral, 1,903 Bitcoin is actively managed, and they've loaned out 10,377 Bitcoin. And they're also activating a portion of their holdings through these, structured lending, collateralized financing to generate an income for the company. And we'll probably talk more about this when we speak to Salman on the podcast tomorrow and get him to give us an idea of the expected return. Because even when you're talking about loaned out 10,000 plus Bitcoin with a valuation of over $1 billion, even a small percentage return gives you considerable amount of payback on that loan.
It certainly does, yeah. And we see the impact of the FASB benefits on HODL. This could be another way that the HODL potentially benefits these companies. Now, again, we've got the CFO on just tomorrow, so we'll go through the numbers in more detail then. But anything standing out in terms of the Q3 financial operational highlights here?
Yeah, we don't have all the background supporting data, so I'm not going to really comment too much on that. But from the high level, here are some of the positives there. Revenue itself increased 92% year on year. So this is comparing revenue for this quarter with the same quarter in 2024. We would expect that because the Bitcoin price is significantly higher. Energized hash rate, they're now up 64% year on year to 60.4 exahash, the largest of all the miners. And that's an increase of just over 20 exahash in the last 12 months. That's a significant increase. Remember, we've talked about the likes of IREN and CleanSpark increasing their hash rate. Mara seems to have gone under the radar, but a 20 plus or 20, nearly 25 exahash increase is a significant increase. Remember, Hive yesterday, they're going to achieve 25 exahash by Thanksgiving. and they started the year at 6 exahash. So Mara had a really good 12 months there. In terms of holding, we talked about that 52,850, the second largest. That's more than doubled from the same period in the last quarter there. And from a net income perspective, they did make a profit, 123 million net income, giving a net position per share of 27 cents per share. So again, that's a good position there. But remember, the devil's in the detail. I mean, one thing that Mara has that not all miners have, they have that significant hodl, and they would have benefited from the FASB rules on the revaluation, which is a paper transaction. The revaluation of that hodl shown at the end of Q2 compared to Q3, that would have been significant. So when we have more data, we'll be able to comment more. But as we've got Salman on tomorrow, he can explain in a little bit more detail.
You certainly can. Yeah. Now, speaking of companies with large hodls, as we shift from earnings over to production results, Riot just came out with their October results. Again, one of the top hodlers in terms of corporate treasuries in the entire world.
They are. They're a top 10 hodler in terms of public listed companies. At the moment, they've managed to increase in October their Bitcoin hodl from 19,287 to 19,324. That's an increase of 37. They sold 400 Bitcoin to cover their costs of operations and capital costs there. Total Bitcoin mined 437. They also had a significant amount of power cells as well, equivalent to about 19 Bitcoin. And the other positive thing I saw there was the actually continuing to increase their operational hash rate. So hash rate went up from 32.2 to 33.2. That's an extra exahash eked out during the month of October. That's helped with the actual mining because the difficulty, as we've talked about a lot over the last few podcasts, has been continuing to rise all the way through over the last 3 or 4 months. Every fortnight it's been going up. So to close that gap to only a 2% difference is pretty good there. In terms of the power cost, now we saw in August it was about 2.8 cents, maybe because the amount of power credits was significantly high in August, and therefore it brought the power cost down. September 4.2 cents, October 4 cents a kilowatt hour. Remember, Corsicana is predominantly using the market rate for power. They've got a few small hedges there, as Jason said on the podcast last week. Rockdale facility does have a PPA agreement in place, and that's where they've been able to utilize the power to get some of those credits back to help when they're not mining, to deliver some sort of a cost reduction on future cost for power. In terms of efficiency, 20.5, it's remained the same. But the final thing I'd like to say is with regards to the HODL value there, that's increased again. The HODL value is now over $2 billion, $2,117 million. And that represents today about 26% of the market capitalization. As we wait for all the results to come through, on a year-to-date perspective, Riot were holding the first position. And we'll see how that develops for the rest of the month as we see more miners announced. We know we've got another miner in a couple of seconds to come through there. But I say that was a strong month for Riot.
I would too, yeah. And we talk a lot about HPC AI on the channel. Obviously, that's the future of this industry, but we can't downplay how important the Bitcoin mining is. They already have these facilities up and running, the machines are in place, and the amount of cash flow and or Bitcoin hodl that this throws off is significant, which is obviously why we like to cover the numbers in detail. CleanSpark was next up in terms of production reports for the month of October. They've amassed a nice hodl as well. Looking forward to getting more direction on the HPC AI outlook here, but in terms of the Bitcoin mining numbers, not a bad month.
Yeah, no, this is another solid month from CleanSpark there. They've mined 612 Bitcoin, only 3% down on September. And you think about the difficulty that would have impacted significantly. Operational hash rate at 50 exahash, that's remained the same. They have got a target to 60. We'll probably hear more maybe when their earnings come out to say what the strategy is to get to that 60. Average operational hash rate, which is key to all these miners. Again, that's eked up in the same way that Rider. That's gone up another exahash during the month there from 45.6 to 46.6. Operational power, remember they've just purchased this site in Texas. That's now increased to 1.3 gigawatts from literally 1 gigawatt the previous month. In terms of the efficiency, only IREN have a more efficient fleet than CleanSpark. They're currently maintaining that level of 16.07 joules a terahash. And in terms of selling Bitcoin, they've been far more selling Bitcoin in recent periods to pay for operational capital expenditure. Remember, during 2024 and parts of 2025, they were hodling everything to build up that nice hodl position, which currently stands at 13,033. Bitcoin mined per day dropped from 21 to 19.7. That's a 6% drop. That is really all about the challenge of the difficulty. And if you look at Bitcoin mined per exahash, and this was the same for Riot, it was a reduction of 5% there just in the month. So 5% of your production down, all because of difficulty. And that's happening on a month by month basis. So this is the problem that miners have got there. We've had a halving in 2024. We're going to have another halving in 2028. But in between those two halvings, we're having this erosion of production. And every month we're seeing this 4, 5, 6% reduction in production there. That's affecting miners. And it's certainly affecting miners today with the Bitcoin price, because that Bitcoin price is heading closer towards 100,000, which is going to affect the hash price. And that's what miners rely on for revenue. In terms of their hodl value, again, CleanSpark have a healthy balance sheet, 1.4 billion in terms of hodl, which currently today represents 27% of their market capitalization. So, in the same way, similar to what Riot and their position as well.
Yeah, a nice summary there. Now, we talk about HUD 8. We've got them on the channel Friday. Asher Janut going to be coming on talking about earnings. They came out with their results today. We've got some slides here to talk through the high-level numbers. Again, we opened with ABTC, what we're seeing in terms of the opportunity for these two different divisions of the company. Some nice highlights here, and again, looking forward to getting more detail directly from the CEO himself.
Yeah, we did talk about on previous podcasts before the end results were coming out, saying that, the Bitcoin price was higher at the end of Q3 or the end of September than it was at the end of June. And so all those companies that have a significant hodl, and believe you me, the three companies we've talked about today, Riot, CleanSpark, and now we're talking about HUT, they've got significant hodl. I mean, if you look at what the hodl HUT and its subsidiary ABTC have, it's well over 13,600, in fact, nearly 13,700 Bitcoin. Now, during the earnings period, they too have benefited significantly from that revaluation of the Bitcoin. So again, another paper transaction has given them, I think, potentially just over 70 million of revaluation. The net income they achieved throughout the period was 50.6 million, and an adjusted EBITDA of 109 million. Now, adjusted EBITDA really looks at probably most of the, you're left with most of the cash costs, so it takes away all the non-cash and those one-off costs there. So 109 million, if you're looking at a company that deals with the cash coming in, the cash going out, that's a nice, for a quarter, a nice position to be in, 109 million positive. Now, energy capacity under management is just over 1 gigawatt as of the 30th of September. But we talked before about this pipeline, 8.6 gigawatts as at the same period there, comprising, and they've actually laid down where this is going to be, 5.8 gigawatts of energy capacity under diligence, 1.2 gigawatts of energy capacity under exclusivity, and 1.5 gigawatts of energy capacity under development there. So they've broken down that figure there so investors can understand exactly what they're doing there. And hopefully we'll get to hear more about some of those three parts of that energy once we get the guys on the channel for the podcast later this week. I've already mentioned this. The value of the Bitcoin there is, currently about 1.6 billion as at September the 30th. Maybe a little bit lower today with the Bitcoin price dropping to closer to 102,000, but still a significant amount as part of the balance sheet. And that strength on the balance sheet will allow them to do things that other miners at the moment are unable to do.
Yeah, now they have a section about compute digital infrastructure. Worth noting that HUD 8 has been involved in the GPU as a service for quite some time, just at a small scale relative to some of these other miners. I remember even when they were Hut 8 in Canada before the US Bitcoin merger, some operations or data centers up here in British Columbia. So again, as we look out into the future, now that ABTC is focused on the Bitcoin side of things, I think there's a lot more to be excited about with Hut 8 and future prospects there.
There is, and they've proven through delivering that service for the last few years that they can deliver this, what we call GPU as a service, rather than sort of like what we hear about this co-location deal there. So doing something on a smaller scale there, proving to the market you can deliver it. And then when you're having those discussions about significant sites, you've already got some experience that you can relate to, and companies coming in there, potential clients coming there, can say, well, actually, they are delivering it, and they can sort of like build to scale now. We've seen that happen with TeraWulf. Remember, TeraWulf had the Wulf Den. We're also seeing the fact that Bitdeer set up a smaller HPC facility in Singapore. A couple of megawatts. And they've got designs now to build significant sites across Asia, across Norway, and also across the US. So having those smaller, like what we say, models of ability, this is going to stand them in good stead. Another thing I'd like to talk about is their expanded Bitcoin mining operations, which increased by 14.8 exahash, bringing the total hash rate for the company to 26.8 exahash, of which the majority of that, 25 exahash, is within the American Bitcoin mining operations. Remember, American Bitcoin is focused on the mining side, and Hut 8's more focused on delivering the sort of like the HPC strategy and having that significant hodl there. Now, in terms of the fleet efficiency, this is, again, it's a new number that's come out there. We've not seen this before, 16.3 joules per terahash. This is literally just, slightly less efficient than the ones that CleanSpark, and they're number 2. So Hut 8 have literally got the third most efficient fleet in the market behind IREN and CleanSpark. And what that means to them is, having cheap energy in Texas there, they've also now got the ability where they've got a really efficient mining fleet delivering Bitcoin at a slightly less cost because of that efficiency.
Exciting times at Hut 8 and ABTC. Now, we've referenced the Bitcoin price throughout today's presentation directly impacts hash price. Unfortunately, and this slide was taken before we started the podcast, hash price now at the $42 range. This is pretty much as low as I can remember since we started our program here, Anthony. Again, more fuel in the fire in terms of why these miners need to pivot and find alternative uses for these megawatts.
Yeah, it's certainly in that ballpark there. I think it dipped below 40 maybe about 18 months ago, just after the halving. But this is not great for mining companies. Bear in mind, go back literally, a week ago when we were seeing sort of like $50 per petahash per day, and this is a whole reduction here. This is not going to be great for miners. Miners are also not getting the amount of Bitcoin they mine because the previous adjustment was higher, and therefore that's impacting on production. And now you're getting revenues which are lower, so you're having a double whammy here for miners. The network hash rate is still remaining above 1100 exahash. That's not great either. So there's no relentless on the global hash rate, which means, difficulty going forward is not going to be a reduction. It looks like it's going to be flat on the next adjustment date, which is November the 12th. Still, obviously, a few days to go before that date there, but it's giving you an early indication that there's not going to be a massive adjustment either way. This is a challenging time for miners, and as we said before, how long are some of these companies going to maintain their fleets, especially now as we're seeing these contracts signed for HPC, where you don't have to worry about a hash price, you don't have to worry about global network, you don't have to worry about difficulty or halving. You're signing a contract to deliver a service, and in the contract it tells you what the revenues are, and you'll have an understanding of the costs associated with the revenues, and you'll understand where your margins are, not for the next year, but for the next 10, 12, 15 years. That's what's exciting the miners at the moment, using that power to deliver the best return on investment for the company and especially for shareholders.
You're exactly right. And that consistency or foresight is exactly the essence of the hash rate forward marketplace on Luxor platform here. You can see the ability for miners to actually sell forward their hash rate, giving them that flexibility or certainty that you talk about maybe months or quarters out. So again, if you're in the Bitcoin mining space, maybe you're looking to make the transition, using derivatives like this is a way to help stabilize revenues as part of that transition. So yet again, another offering from Luxor. We talked about their energy offering last week. The forward hash rate marketplace, another great option out there if you're in the industry. Now, a lot covered today. Let us know your thoughts in the comment section below, specifically on earnings, Hut 8 and Mara. If you have any additional questions for the team, again, we've got Patrick Fleury, CFO of Wulf, on this afternoon, and Salman Khan, CFO of Mara, tomorrow. So a nice little CFO special for you guys. Hit the like button. Feel free to subscribe. We'll see you back here in a few hours' time.